Awesome. Okay. Does anyone have any questions about anything before we start with all the class material? Okay.
Oh, I did.
Yeah.
On our final exam paper that you gave us, under chapter 12, and I don't know if this was just me, but when I printed it out, so like after number 17, there's like a whole bunch of answer choices and then no question.
Yeah, skip those.
Okay.
I think something's happening when I put stuff on Moodle sometimes. You said chapter 12?
Yes. And it's after 17.
Yeah, there's no question there. That's crappy. So just don't worry about that. It won't be on the exam.
Okay.
I take the questions from the study guide. I have tried, let me just say this too. I'm glad you brought that up actually. So I always edit I edit the study guides every semester because I make some, tweaks and stuff. I think there might be some questions from a previous edition of the book in the study guide, like 2 or 3 that I might have missed. What I'm doing right now is going through the exam and making sure I've gotten all those out. So if you run across questions that you can't find the answer to, or the answer looks different in the new edition, that's what that is. If you would let me know, that helps me a lot. If that happens, that would be awesome to know.
Okay, thank you. I think I made a note down next to under chapter 9. And I'm going to feel really silly if everybody else found the answer and I didn't. But I think number 5. And then I felt like there was another one, but I can't find it right off right now. But
number 5. So with regard to intelligence, most theorists agree that there is both blank plus blank. Is that the one you're looking at?
Yes.
How about this? Why don't we look at it together as a class,
okay,
if we can figure out what it is.
I made a mark next. I kind of remember, it's been a while since I went over that question, but I felt like in the book, it could have been like more than one answer. Like I put none of the above. There's still very little agreement because I felt like that was in the book.
Which is true. That is true.
Okay. But then for some reason, I was second guessing myself because I felt like there was something else in the book that made me think it was another one.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Bedard, in this specific question, I thought B is the answer. One general ability factor, many lower level factors, or
Okay.
I was wrong.
Oh, you know what? I underlined a little bit under B. I think I was going between B and D.
Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else have some input? And this one's on the exam too, by the way. This one's on the exam. So sorry, Jenny, go ahead.
No, I had put B also.
Yeah. I like B, which is, it's true. This is a tricky one because there is some debate still about intelligence. We're going to talk about this today. We're going to talk about this specific area because intelligence for a long time was there was 2 things about intelligence and personality. Actually, it was like locked in forever kind of thing. And now we're thinking, well, wait a minute, intelligence is more than just 1 or 2 things. But there is a general ability factor for sure. And there's other lower level factors. We're going to talk about all of that. So I would say I'd go with B.
Can you restate which one that was for again? Chapter what?
Yeah, the
Chapter
5th
9.
question. Yeah, chapter 9, the question 5.
Thank
Question
you.
numbered 5. Yeah. I think sometimes too, obviously, you can get rid of A, right? That one doesn't make sense. B kind of makes a lot of sense when you read it. C, those are all piece, spatial mechanical. Those are part of some testing that you do, general ability testing that you would do. But the practical aptitudes, that doesn't really make sense because that's not necessarily the same thing. An aptitude is like something you would be able to do in the future because of things you can do in the right in the present kind of thing, right? And it can't be none of the above, I don't think, except that it says there's very little agreement. That's what does that make
That's what
Jill, is
threw
that
me
what's
off
throwing you off?
because
Yeah.
it was in the book that there was very little agreement about it.
Yeah,
What,
and that's true. That is true. Except that it is actually made up of one general factor and many other lower level factors. And some intelligence, intelligence testing will have like 20 factors. I mean, some of them are really long. So anyway, good question. Good question. Any other
Dr.
questions before
Bernard.
we start? Yeah.
Yes, on chapter 14, number 31.
Okay. Talk to me about what you're thinking.
What am I thinking? I'm thinking that I was thinking B, dyadic
Dyadic.
adjustments. Yeah, dyadic adjustment scale.
Okay.
That's what I was thinking,
Okay.
but I could not. I wasn't sure.
Yeah. Okay. That wouldn't be a horrible guess. Which one of these could we say is not? Probably not.
Okay, so it is chapter 1431
Mm-hmm.
is in addition.
Mm-hmm. In addition to evaluating relationship satisfaction. Yep.
So what I chose, it was A, couples
Okay.
pre-counseling inventory.
Okay.
And I even searched it on like in the book as well as Google.
Okay.
So is it wrong?
What do you guys think?
Well, I was going between those two, couples pre-counseling and the dyadic.
Okay. Anybody else? Or has anybody gotten this far? This kind of towards the end.
I haven't gotten that far yet.
So I think two people are saying it could be A or B, or that's what we're deciding between.
Yeah.
What would make it not be D? I'm just asking. I'm just.
I was thinking it was more at the beginning and not the satisfaction inventory. It's talking about balance.
Yeah. Do those that would probably be a good sorry, my computer just did something weird. That'd be a good, so that particular one, like looking at violence, like evaluating violence, that would be maybe a key to me of what assessment does that.
It would be a what? I'm sorry, you cut out.
So that would be a key to me.
Right.
Like what assessment looks
But
at violence?
I could see the marital adjustment test. I mean, being something, the division of the responsibilities, decision-making structure.
Mm-hmm.
I can
So-
see that.
Sorry.
Go
No, go
ahead.
Is like what really made sense to me is because it assesses violence. So I thought it has to be something like a pre-counseling, like something you have to diagnose, not diagnose, but at least to assess in the beginning.
Yeah. What I would say is, and you can look at the book too, like
Yeah.
look at these look at these assessments
Mhm.
and see what they assess.
Okay.
So that that's
Yes.
what assessment that's listed would include all of these areas and other, I mean, there could be more too, but specifically these areas.
So what I remember when I searched it in the book, it showed that the couple of pre-counseling inventory. But I really don't, I'm trying to search it in the book now.
Yeah, it's not listed in the book. The marital adjustment is, the dyadic adjustment is, the marital satisfaction, but the pre-counseling one is not even listed, the couple's pre-counseling inventory.
Yeah.
Because it's on, starts on pages 290, 294.
Yeah, it's towards the
294,
back. It's like it's towards the back.
Yeah. Mhm.
So
I'm
yeah.
sorry, Dr. Beck.
Yeah.
I actually went completely different than everybody. And maybe I'm wrong. I said it would be D because of the description, and then I actually looked at the satisfaction inventory of everything that it covered, and I felt like violence, I could plug that in to, maybe I'm wrong, because I didn't feel like the dyadic was about, it says to the quality of marriage couples, and I just felt like the satisfaction, like you said, those different things you could plug the question into.
Mhm. I like what you're thinking.
Okay.
Is that clear enough? Did I just give you the answer potentially? We talked about MSIR on Thursday, right? And I told you that the way it scored a 2, like it's color coded. Remember, like starts that kind of grayish red and then it gets to deep red. It actually will look at violence or conflict, right? Sometimes this is a good example to me. Now, I totally understand why you guys are saying the other things. I get it. Which is why sometimes not sometimes. My study guides are usually harder than the exam. Because I want you to think about it. Because once you get to the exam, I want you to just take it, right? I could see why you would say a couple of the other answers for sure. I could see that. I don't think the couples pre-counseling inventory is like in our text, right? I don't think it is.
No, I couldn't find it.
Now, I will say this. The dyadic adjustment scale was like, there's actually a revised one of that now. That one is specifically for different types of things. The MSIR, or marital satisfaction inventory revised, is really broad. Like it measures several things at once. And that's why it's such a good evaluation tool to me, or an assessment tool. So I definitely would, Marilyn, I like the way you're thinking about it. This is an interesting one too, because there's not like necessarily application here. You could actually look these up and see, what they assess, and that would probably give you the answer. So I'm going D.
Thank you.
If I was taking the exam, I'd go D. Any other questions? Okay. Let's talk about, let me get why don't we start with intelligence tonight? I think that's what I got down. I'm going to do, between last time we met and today, also had a really good idea. I think we're going to try. See how it goes. Let me get rid of some of this stuff on my screen. I got too much stuff. Okay. So we're going to look at chapter 10. So the achievement, aptitude, and applying it to counseling. And one of the reasons why I like this particular topic is really important, I think, because there's a larger number of counselors doing a couple of things they used to not do. One's career counseling, which incorporates some of these things, achievement, aptitude. The other thing is, at least in my experience, and maybe this is just at Amberton, there seems to be a lot more school counselors doing LPC work, and I've had some LPC people going to school counseling, so there's like a lot of crossover, which I think is great. A lot of school systems now are hiring not just school counselors, but like LPC folks and LMFT folks, which I think is good. I think when I first started hearing about this was probably like, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago, that some of the bigger systems would start doing it. Now I've heard a lot more systems hiring people. Like Dr. Armstrong actually partners with a few systems and kind of helps out do several things with them. I'm a huge fan of collaboration and partnerships with mental health providers. I think it's a great idea because LPCs, for example, LPCs and LMFTs and school counselors have a little bit different training, some similar training, but a little bit different training. And I think they can help each other. To me, I think it could be a good, helpful thing. And so we're going to start with achievement, aptitude. And so the first thing is kind of understanding the difference between achievement and aptitude. There's a little bit of nuance there. So I'm going to share a couple of things, and I'm going to share like a personal story of mine, actually about aptitude testing. And then I'm going to go through a few of these notes, and then we're going to do a breakout group. We're going to do a couple of different times. We're going to do breakouts. So the first thing is achievement tests. So that's in general what's already been acquired or learned, what you've already picked up, right? Aptitude tests are kind of predictive in a way of looking at performance and the ability to learn new tasks or skills. And so looking at the kind of skills and ability that you have now and kind of being predictive in the future. So the contrast between them is really about purpose. So when I was 22, in my early 20s, I was pretty much lost. So I graduated high school and started college because that was kind of what was expected. And I went to a couple of junior colleges. In the second year, I had like a 1.6 GPA, and I was like, would rather go play golf and hang out with my friends than go to school. So I just stopped going to school. And then I just started working full time at a grocery company. And I told my parents and everybody, I was like, I'm just done with school, which was like, in my family, we talked about unwritten rules last time. An unwritten rule in my family is education. Like my mom has an MBA, my dad has an MBA. My grandma was one of the first women in our little town I grew up in to go to college. I mean, it was like education's like everything. So when I say I'm not going to college anymore, they're like, "What are you saying? Why are you talking about this?" So I just quit because I was like, I don't want to go to college. So I just stopped going. And then when I got to be about 22, I'm sitting there going, what am I going to, a little bit lost, because the company I was working for, in order to move up, which I wanted to, you had to have a degree, and which I didn't have. So I went to a place called Ames, which is in Dallas. It's been there for a long time, since the late 70s. And they do aptitude testing, which is it's actually a little bit achievement, a little bit aptitude, a little bit of career assessment kind of rolled into one. But they do look heavily at your aptitude and try to predict like careers that potentially you would like. And at the time, I was also thinking about going back to college. They also gave me a list of colleges that matched whatever that career path would be. Like, I'm not saying 1 or 2, I'm saying like 7 or 8. Like my career path, they gave me 7 or 8 things, and then 7 or 8, I think maybe 9 colleges to kind of look at that specialized in whatever those things were. And that really helped me a lot because it gave me a lot of choices and a lot of options. And then I could kind of pursue and kind of look into those various things. Now it's fast forward to November last year. I've been talking to my wife about this for 25 years. And she finally took it. And I feel vindicated because we walked out and she goes, I should have done this so long ago. I didn't say anything. I didn't say I told you so. I didn't say you're right. I just said, I'm so glad you did it. So it's really, really helped her because she grew up with the exact opposite family of me. Education was like, it was good, but not a big deal. And at one point her mom and dad were like, why don't you just, go find some job you can do on the side and don't worry about college. I mean, so that we have like two opposite experiences. And so for her to get some answers of what she's actually good at, but also like, hey, here's some careers that match you, because she's never had that before. Or these careers match you. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? Like what it feels like to match, right? Something that you're like, oh, I really like this. You know what I mean? That's what the type of testing, these types of testing and assessments and inventories can do for people. They can answer questions for sure, but they can also start matching people with things that they're actually good at and they like. It doesn't mean that every part of it you like or you're good at. It just means it starts matching you with these components that are really important in your life. So when you think about the purpose of the assessment or the testing, achievement is, hey, here's what I've already learned, and aptitudes, here's, we're trying to predict. Can anybody here, I'm assuming someone, can give me an example of an achievement test? What would that be?
I guess it could be the GMAT.
Yeah.
I took the GMAT because I also went to TCU and I did an MBA.
Yep.
So that was a requirement to
Yep.
be able to be accepted.
Yeah. GRE
Yes.
would be similar.
I mean,
What
I
about
would
star?
say,
What about the star?
yeah, that's what I was about to say.
Yeah.
Or just even any like chapter test.
Yeah.
Like, I think that-
Anything, right? Yeah. What we just looked at, right? The study guide. When we take the exam, it's the same thing, right? Achievement. And there's different way to do achievement, right? Different ways to look at it. You can assess individual students. It's usually a pretty dynamic process typically. Sometimes this is called high stakes testing. Do you guys ever hear that? Like you folks in school, do you ever hear high stakes testing? I'm assuming you probably do somewhere.
All the time.
Yeah. Claudia, figured you would.
Yes.
Yeah. Of course, as a parent, never heard it till my kids got in school. Start hearing it more. Super fascinating to hear it. But when you start thinking about like measuring academic progress, that has started obviously to be, it's become like other things in our world politicized a bit. So we got lots of theories, right? Lots of ideas. And when we think about No Child Left Behind, which we have to talk about because it's a huge part of what's changed in education in the early 2000s. Like it or love it, it doesn't matter. It's here. It's been here for a long time, and it's what we use now, at least public school. And we can go into it all we want. The one thing that I think is fascinating is that we also made this leap to. Let me make sure I'm on the right slide. Yeah, here we go. We made this leap to Common Core standards that kind of came on board. And I remember when my first experience with being lost and confused as a parent at school was my son. This would have been in 2013 or 14. Texas changed the TEKS for math like in the middle of the year. Or they changed, I think it was not just math, but that math was big to us because we were like lost all of a sudden. And I remember going to talk to his teacher because he would come home and do his homework and I would have zero idea like what he was doing, right? We go from, you know, how we learn, like maybe all of us potentially probably learned a certain way, and then now it's taught a different way. And we can argue whether it's right or wrong. It doesn't matter. We're doing it's here, right? It doesn't matter what's going on. But I can remember going and trying to understand it, and the teacher had to explain it. And I literally said this. I said, I need you to talk to me like I'm 4. Like just talk to me like I'm 4 and help me understand what this is, because it was really hard for my brain. The only reason why I'm bringing that up is just the same way as Common Core in some people's brains does not make sense. The old way that maybe all we learned maybe didn't make sense either, right? But we were expected to just conform, right? Does that make sense? Like I want to talk about this specifically because I think it's important for us to remember that one of the reasons why we do assessments in the first place, to me, is sometimes we want to figure out how someone's brain works. Like, what's the best way that this person learns? What's the best way that this person can actually communicate what they're thinking? What's the best way that they can actually figure out how to write what they are thinking, or, or compute things? I mean, what's the best way we can help them do that? Does that make sense? Especially when we're talking about high stakes testing, right? Like high stakes as in high stakes for the schools because they get financing from that. High stakes for the student because they need to learn certain things as they, move forward. And so I think I'm a big fan of and a huge supporter of school systems, all school systems, because the job that they do is very difficult to me, very difficult, because you're not just teaching anymore. I realize what's happening. I have clients that are teachers, and I've been in Everton a while. I've seen some changes. I understand things that are happening. There's a school system here next to me, Anna, which is a pretty big school system, probably gonna be a 5A school in 2 years. And they went to the 4-day-a-week school basically so they could keep teachers. Pretty much is the only reason. I mean, that's the biggest reason. So I understand the stakes that we're talking about when it comes to the school system and working. And so I think it's good for us to be supportive and try to support whatever is happening with our school system. So when we start thinking about achievement tests, especially, we could debate them all day long and say they're good or bad, or there's some that are good or bad. Either way, I feel like we need to be supportive. And to me, it's really more about how does someone's brain work and how can we help that person figure that out and help them kind of go that direction. That's what makes sense to me. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Hopefully, potentially.
Yes.
Okay. There's a couple of things I want to look at specifically. We're going to jump to aptitude testing. And some of the things we're going to talk about today with achievement and aptitude and a little bit of intelligence are also going to fold into some of the behavioral assessments we're going to talk about too. So we're going to kind of mesh a couple of things together today. When we talk about aptitude, we're starting to think about more than just like what you've achieved, but like, okay, the GRE is actually more of a aptitude. The GMAT's actually more of like, it's one measure that colleges, for example, would use to see if you could handle the work. One other measure would be GPA, right? Like, here's what I've done in the past. Like, here's my scoring, but here's my score on this entrance exam, right? I'm just curious. I don't know that. Did Emerton make you guys take any like entrance exam or anything? I don't think
No.
so. Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's one big plus for us because a lot of schools you have to take something.
No,
Remember when I got my, yeah.
sorry. I
No,
had to
go
take,
ahead.
sorry, I had to take the GRE to get into the course, which was a pain in the something.
Yes.
Because I
Yes.
had math, basic kind of, I don't know.
Algebra. Yeah.
it was, yeah, and I'm from England, so our math system is a bit different. We probably do the same kind of stuff, but in a different way.
Yep.
So I was getting all my math teachers at school to kind of go, okay, how do I solve this problem? This does not make sense to me.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of heartache and pain for about 3 months, but I was good at test taking by that time. So that POE was very important to get through.
Yeah. Well, that's a great example, because when I got my PhD, I had to take the GRE as well, and I hadn't taken any algebraic math in a couple of decades. So I feel your pain when it comes to that. And I just like barely qualified by the skin of my teeth. I was like, I knew what score I needed, and that's what I went for. But those are one predictor. They're not all the predictors. There for a while, over COVID, they suspended a lot of the testing for students getting into college, which is kind of fascinating. I mean, there's other ways to look at it, basically. So when we think about aptitude assessments or assessing what someone, potentially could be good at, there's actually some pretty good information out there for it. Because there's a lot of blending of aptitude and achievement, or especially aptitude with career assessment. There's a lot of blending that can happen there, which I think is good. And so when we think about that, let me get over to my right here thing, my right thing. Here we go. We start to think about a couple of different things. If we think about like the duties or the job roles that someone's going to be doing or performing, that's one part of it. But we also think about the setting that they're going to be performing certain things in. Like, for example, so I see clients virtually, and I work with a company that I had to apply for this job and get interviewed, and the application, the interviews, and the discussion about the job roles was all virtual, and everything I do is virtual. It's totally the opposite of how I started in this field. Everything was in person. You got questioned in person. Like when I did my MFT degree, my original master's degree, and my PhD, we got interviewed in person. Like, we had to go basically interview with them and get questioned in person. All the clients I ever worked with up until 2020 were in person, never virtual. And so that specific change in our world, like the virtual change, has really been a really interesting dynamic that's happened, right, over time. So when you think about that, now there's starting to be research about like effectiveness of virtual technologies with whatever industry you name, whatever the industry is, and there's actually a fair amount of data that's coming out. We actually kind of know a few things actually about mental health and working with people virtually. It actually can be more effective than people thought. The reason virtual mental health or telehealth started originally was to reach underserved areas of the country, so like rural areas or some of the areas that maybe had less mental health around. And now we can do that. I mean, we can reach, like, I've got clients, so I'm licensed in multiple states, but I can work with a client that has a phone and they can be anywhere. It doesn't matter where they are, like any town. Like, I've worked with people in big cities, in small little suburbs, and then out in the country, like some people like in towns of like I've never heard of before. And sometimes they have to go to a specific spot to get cell phone service or Wi-Fi service. So when we start thinking about that, the reason I'm bringing this up is because I think one of the things that's going to be happening in our world is like aptitudes, especially like people are going to, I think, going to be kind of like working in specific, doing specific things virtually now, like starting out that maybe we wouldn't have done before, even in companies, right? Like big corporations will be like, this is a remote virtual job only, or this is an in-person or a hybrid job, right? If we talk about it that way. Now, the one place that education's probably the one huge holdover when it comes to that. But even here at Amerton, we've wrestled with in-person or hybrid or virtual only. I mean, everybody's kind of wrestling with this. And I'm bringing it up because it's another factor we have to think about, I think. Does that make sense? What I'm saying? I think we have to think about it. Anyway, so some people might have the aptitude for that. Some people maybe not. And there's some personality characteristics too. I often said this about COVID. If besides the fact that COVID, I think, was pretty traumatic overall. I mean, has been very traumatic. The overall effects of it have been traumatic. If you are an introvert, COVID was not so bad in terms of like being home and isolated. And now there's been some negative effects that have happened on the back end for sure, absolutely. But if you're extroverted, extreme extrovert, like if your job was an extrovert job, like a sales job, marketing job, it was very difficult for you. You had a hard time. It was very hard for you. And so, anyway, there's a lot of things that are changing and kind of gonna change, I think, over time. I think some things might not change as much, but having an aptitude to do certain things, I think if the more we can help people kind of figure those things out, the better it would be. Like I have people, especially in my Practicum 2 class, ask all the time about doing virtual therapy because it's probably hard for a lot of people to fathom that, but I really like it, and I'm a very extroverted person, and so I have to do other things outside of sitting in my office all day, every day. But I also have I think I have a specific aptitude for that. Inside of my aptitude assessment that I did, part of my personality is an extrovert specialist, which means people come to me for that specialty that I have. So that kind of fits me a lot, and I can do that from anywhere. I can be face to face in person or virtual. So that part for me fits. And so anyway, I'm going off on tangents. One of the things about let me make sure I want to talk about this real quick. The coaching aspect. There's definitely been a rise in kind of the coaching or test taking strategy industry, helping like kids get ready for the ACT, SAT, let's say in high school. Both my kids are doing a class now. My son starts a class next year on that, next year on that. And so that's definitely kind of learning testing approaches, learning how to look at the content and the testing material, and also work on like things like test anxiety, like how well you do when you're taking a test, an exam, or even an assessment potentially. And so that's definitely something that I think has changed a lot over time, and definitely something that it's like its own industry now, basically. I mean, it's a huge industry, which I don't think is bad necessarily, but it goes back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier, in that achievement and aptitude both are just one measure of someone's potential success, not the measure, and so I think it's important for us to keep those things in mind. Okay. Enough of that. Enough of my rambling on. Okay. let's talk about career assessment. That's one I do want to talk about today. All right. Okay, we start talking about career counseling is become a really big field for LPCs and LMFTs. I've got a few friends that got jobs at like at the university level doing like working in career counseling centers with students, and they're super successful. I think it's super helpful. I'm going to assume that a lot of you here are changing careers potentially. Maybe. So how did you figure out you wanted to change careers? If you're changing, how'd you figure that out?
I'm a first grade teacher, and I've been a teacher for 15 years. And I just decided that I really wanted to help students. And so I knew for a while I wanted to do counseling, school counseling.
Mhm.
That's kind of-
Okay.
Mhm.
When you say help students, can you tell me more about that part?
I've had a couple experiences just as a teacher in my classroom where I was just like, you know, I want to be able to give you all the help you need, but I have 20 other students in here.
Mhm.
And so, it's really sad that in first grade you see kids already with anger issues
Mhm.
and making threats and things like that. And so I just kind of decided that that's what I wanted to do. Is
Okay.
I wanted to help those students and focus more on that.
Gotcha. Okay. Anybody else? Go for it.
Um,
Oh, sorry. Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. Who wants to go?
Nick, you go first.
All right. I'll be switching careers from the juvenile criminal justice system pretty much. I'm a probation officer now, a juvenile probation officer. And I worked in the jail for 3 years. And kind of like Jill, I wanted to switch over to help be able to assist more and help with the kids' thinking patterns pretty much.
Mhm. Good.
Because I'm like now I have like a 20 kid caseload. And I spend very little time with them getting to know why they're doing what they're doing.
That's a tough job,
Yeah, it is.
but a good job. Good. Edgar, what about you?
My experience is very similar to Jill. I am also a teacher. I teach second grade, and I also been teaching for 15 years. But in my case, I do want to help the kids, but also I want to do something different and also kind of stay in the same field. I do like the education environment. That's why I want to stay there. But I feel like I've been a teacher for a long time, so I really need to do something different.
Okay.
I wanna, I don't know, like I've been doing it for a long time, so I'm kind of tired of it. So that's
Yeah.
why I want to do something in the same field but different.
Yeah. Absolutely. When you say different, what does different look like? Or how would you know if you were doing something different that you enjoyed?
Yeah, instead of doing lesson plans or having a class in front of me, I want to do something like Jill mentioned. I want to focus on kids who have anger issues, or kids who are having who are struggling learning. Maybe do group therapy. So that will be something that really will make me happy. Doing something different, and at the same time helping the kids, focusing on the kids who really need help.
Gotcha. Okay. So I'm assuming every teacher's shaking their head about, what's this trigger point of anger issues? This is, I hear this a lot. So what's y'all's thought about, like, where's that coming from?
Oh, sometimes the instance I had last year, I think it came from the parents. They were acting out what was being shown to them. And then also kind of being treated like he was a teenager when he was 6. So allowed to watch gory movies, allowed to watch movies like Saving Private Ryan, where you're killing people and things like that.
Gotcha. Okay. So
Yeah,
some things at home, like some things are mirroring, maybe. Okay.
Yeah, I agree with Jill. I think that the situation is that the kids are nowadays in our generation, they're watching movies that they shouldn't watch. But also, I think parents are not setting rules, that they're not giving them limits. I feel like they are just letting them do whatever they want, and there are no rules. So I don't want to yell at you. I don't want to do anything. So you do whatever you want, and because I don't want to say anything to you.
Okay. So anybody else?
Well, I'm a current school counselor, and I've been doing this 16 years now. And I've really seen, and I've been in education 23 years. It's just been not only parents, society has been changing, but what I think has been the big point has been technology.
Okay.
I remember kids just having little Palm Pilots and stuff, and and that was the blueberries, and those were the biggest problems. But really, it's the access to technology, the instant technology, and then the introduction of social media apps have completely changed the game. And that's it's continuing the drama 24/7, instant access to things 24/7. So it's just this, the lack of coping skills that they're not being taught at home, resiliency, or how about you got to sit in it. Yeah. You know what? Sometimes life sucks and you got to sit in it. And they don't understand that because they have instant gratification that technology has provided and parents have provided have been the big game changer to me.
And something else I've noticed is they can't problem solve like simple life problems, because maybe if they were at home during COVID instead of so I teach first grade. So the group I have right now, maybe they didn't get to go to like a daycare or a pre-K because of COVID. So they were at home and, oh, I can't find this. Oh, mommy and daddy are going to go find it for me. Like a lot of things I'm seeing is they can't problem solve, just simple life skills. Just they expect somebody to solve it for them. I can't find this. Go find it for me.
I totally agree with everything both of you all just said, but also I think that from you all standpoint, you all get to see very little of what's going on. But with me being a probation officer, like I'm in the home, I'm speaking to parents probably 4 or 5 times a week, and it's like I work in Oak Cliff, a really rough area, and those parents poverty has a big hand in it. And that it don't only affect the parents, but it affect the kids. And they're very angry. They're enticed with the rap movement. A lot of my kids that I work with, they like to play with guns. And they're angry at the wrong people.
Maybe angry at themselves a little bit.
Yeah.
So I switched gears here. We're doing behavioral assessment for a reason, because this is what we're talking about here a little bit. So I think I love this discussion. So I'm not going to shove it. I'm not going to snuff it out. I want to keep talking about it because I think it's important. One of the things I'm hearing from everybody right now is there's different aspects of behavior, right? There's different reasons why, let's say, or Maybe it's environmental. Maybe it's cultural. Maybe it's maybe there's things happening at home. Maybe there's things happening with their friendships. Maybe there's things happening that they don't feel like they have control of. Whatever that thing is, and it could be, any age too, right? Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. Drugs play a lot in this. Like the drug culture is like, I think it's worse than ever before. Like, especially since marijuana has become legal, even though it's not legal in Texas unless for municipal use. But these kids are heavily on drugs. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, even the parents, like they're on drugs, like especially marijuana, and
Yeah.
they don't see anything wrong with it, but it changes their mindset.
Yeah, and I don't think we should. So two things. Something Claudia said and something Nick's talking about now, to me, go together. There are a few things that we actually know brain-wise. Let's talk about neuroscience for a second. So our brain has a capacity, an enormous capacity, to seek out pleasure. And the reason it does that is not for for necessarily a pleasurable experience. The reason it does that is for survival. Our brains are wired to help us survive, not make us happy. Our brain is not wired to make us happy. We choose to do things that make us happy or not, or, Now, I'm not saying that some environmental factors don't affect that. They absolutely do. But in general, on a whole, our brains are wired for survival, which is great 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago or 10,000 years ago when things could chase us and kill us. That was awesome. We need that to keep us alive, right? Fast forward to now. The reason I bring that pleasure part up is we know a few things about like let's say social media, what Claudia was talking about, and Nick's talking about drug use. Let's talk about those two things. I'm not saying that they're the same. I'm saying that there's similar effects to your brain. That's all. They're not the same thing, but they do similar things. Much like I've seen scans, MRI scans of brains that light up on meth. Let's say meth is extremely addictive. The same parts of the brain light up on meth that light up when you eat sugar. This is very similar, right? Now, obviously, the consequences and the effect are different. I'm not saying they're the same, but the reason I'm bringing this up is because potentially what's happening in our world is that, let me preface this before, hang on. This is my theory. This is not, Chris Bedard didn't say this is what's happening. This is what I think is going on, or one of the aspects that's going on. Our brain, because it seeks pleasure, because it's wired for survival, is also really, really good at avoiding things that don't do that. Right? Claudia mentioned something that I think is very profound. I don't think she knows she said it. Sitting in something, sitting in pain, sitting in emotions that are difficult is very hard, not just for kids, but for everybody, people, right? So we will avoid those hard emotions or those hard things, or, we'll avoid them. Avoidance is a strategy. And avoidance is super easy to do with your device. Super easy. Right? Anyone right now could get off the screen, like go and just do your blank screen and be on your phone, and I wouldn't know. And honestly, I don't care. It doesn't affect me. It affects you, right? Right? How many of you have been on a Zoom call and you're like, oh my gosh, this is really tough, and you want to get on your phone? Or how many of you have been in a situation where something difficult could be rising and you're uncomfortable and what do you want to do?
You want to escape.
Yeah, which is avoidant behavior, right? In avoidance, I am becoming more and more convinced that avoidance is what we're doing. Not 100% of the time. And avoidance is good sometimes. Avoiding something to get out of something is good sometimes. Don't hear me say that avoidance is bad. But avoidance is a great short-term idea, not a long-term strategy. Same thing with drugs. Same thing. If we want to avoid something, sometimes we want to. Sorry, my dog's going nuts. If we want to avoid something, we will. And drugs are a great avoidance strategy. We can avoid all kinds of things doing that. I'm not saying that's the only reason. I'm not saying that. But this is something that happens in our brain. When we use our phone enough, it basically turns on the dopamine receptors, just like using drugs does. Turns on the dopamine receptors, and after a while, if the dopamine's open and the ghost system is on such a high level, our prefrontal cortex doesn't have a chance to stop it, to filter it, to slow it down, right? That's literally what's happening. If we say a 15-year-old who doesn't have a fully formed prefrontal cortex, right? So who's the prefrontal cortex for a 15-year-old? Somebody's got to be.
The parent, the teacher,
or grandparent. In y'all's case, what y'all are talking about, Jill started the conversation by talking about it. The teachers are sometimes, right? Claudia said 2 things profound. 1, she talked about avoidance, and 2, she said no. We don't like no. Nobody likes no, really. We don't like. I heard no growing up like all the freaking time because I always want to do crazy stuff, and of course, then I just do it anyway. You know what I'm saying? But that is a thing. That is a deal, right? But the prefrontal cortex is what is happening or what is not on board yet. And we can fast forward to 35, someone that's 35 that still hasn't figured out or had that ability to have that discipline enough to shut certain things down in their brain. Now, there's lots of other things that are going on. I'm not trying to be reductionistic in the conversation, but I think that we need to think about things us as mental health providers need to be kind of like 30,000 foot view folks, right? We need to be up here because eventually we're going to be in the middle of it, but we need to be able to be up here a little bit. Does that make sense what I'm saying? I know I'm diverging into like addiction talk but when we think about assessing someone's behavior, there's a lot of things I feel like we need to kind of think through. Now, if people have got their hands up, I'm assuming they want to talk. I'm assuming. Sometimes people have their hand up because they agree, but if Sarah, I think
Blake is before me. I assume. I think he or she. I'm sorry. I don't know.
Yeah, go.
Sure.
Whoever.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah.
course.
Well, I was just going to chime in and just say I really, personally, I absolutely kind of buy into this theory, and I just really enjoyed the conversation. So just kind of chiming in there, and it also made me, well, I feel like I have personal experience with this. So I was born in '90, so I had about 10 years of pre-internet life, and then internet came along. So I think one, I've found that this is true for my life. And 2, I guess I feel like this, while someone could say it's reductionist, I also maybe would say it's kind of universal. Like you said, it kind of cuts across socioeconomic, because if someone doesn't have a phone, maybe they have access to drugs, like Nicholas was saying. And it just reminded me of the other class I'm in, the advanced skills with you, in the textbook you chose. I was just really, when I read the intro, it was talking exactly about this. And for me, it just resonates a whole lot. So I guess just sharing appreciation and personally, I really think this is a important for us to be learning and kind of framing this way.
Good. Sarah.
Yes, sir. So I just about like how we changed our career, or we chose something different than what we used to do. My undergrad was in biotechnology. I studied science. I was fascinated about tissue culture on all those stuff, and I'm still. Then I moved to the United States 10 years ago, and after 2 years, I started working with the Refugee Resettlement Agency, and for 8 years. And the reason I chose LPC or professional counseling is after COVID hit, I had to work from home and dealing with all my clients through intensive case management and psychosocial support group. And then my husband came to me and said, you have to be a counselor. And I thought he was joking, but he said, no, you have to just go and like ask. And long story short, I took the what do you call it, that index? Myers-Briggs.
Myers-Briggs. Mhm.
Yes, sir. And the first career, like jobs or careers match me. The first thing is counselor and psychologist, etc., etc. So I changed it. I thought it wasn't like it's something happened, but now I think even in the subconscious level inside me, working with refugees and immigrants from all over the world, without considering the fact that they are PTSD, and we are trying to resettle them and have them to work. And by the way, they are the most resilient population I've ever seen. They are here because they chose to survive and to have a safe life. And I'm not being like, I'm not talking from a politics like side of the story. I am just being very honest and from a very humane aspect. But interestingly, designing the refugee resettlement program in the US, which is, by the way, the US is the biggest country in the world that is resettle refugees. But guess what? There is no psychological or mental health aspect in the design of the refugee resettlement program. And it has been for, you name it, how many years, like since the US existed, and the refugee resettlement program have been designed to serve this mission, but the mental health aspect in the program is not exist in a frank way or in a broad, like a clear way. It's within the services. And honestly, I talked with one of the State Department, Homeland Security representative through our meetings, and I asked them this question, and there wasn't a good answer. And I really, therefore, I think, hoping that one day I will advocate with a tool, which is my license, hoping that we can reconstruct the program and include mental health services within the original design of this program. On a side note, I'm sorry, about the virtual reality in our life. I don't know, and you correct me, Dr. Bedard, I read that especially for kids, I think having the virtual aspect for the kids can affect them negatively. In the beginning, I thought it is just from thinking, but then I studied and I read about the cerebellum in our brain, especially in kids. It does not develop well without a physical activity. And that's
and not just that, Sarah, the physical activity absolutely is important. but there's also a misconnection point in
Yes.
person too.
Yes, and also we are a social creature,
Right.
and we have, it's a mandatory to learn social skills, how to interact, how to develop those connections and energy between each other. And echoing Claudia and Jill, Nicola, everyone, I think our kids need to develop social skills. And I think that's the reason there is a kind of a noticeable absence of the parents, because they are busy working 8 hours a day, coming home exhausted. And I don't know, that will take me to another path, which is individualism as a culture in the United States. And there is some shades now thrown here and there on our, like the new generations or the young generation, because there is no time for the kids to take care of. I'm so sorry I took so
No, you're
long.
okay.
It's just,
You're okay. That's
I
okay.
wanted
That's why,
to,
but this is why we have class. This is why we have discussions. Everyone here has, vast experiences that are very important to what we're talking about, excuse me. And what I want us to be able to do is not just play off of our experiences, which is super important. Like, you're going to use your experiences for whatever you do in the future, right? I want us to also be able to think critically about what we're doing. And one of the critical components I think that's important is the way our brains work is very specific. And once we figure out how that person's brain works, based on several factors, obviously, once we figure out how that person's brain works, we can really help them a lot. Sarah mentioned something that I haven't talked about very much at all, and that is PTSD, or traumatic experiences, whether they're a refugee that's coming from traumatic experiences, trying to get away from something, or someone that's here that's had a traumatic experience, or someone that's currently in a traumatic experience. We also know that trauma can actually change the actual structure of someone's brain too, not just change their brain, but the structure of their brain. And untreated trauma over time, let's say, now let me be specific. There's little t trauma and big T trauma. Little t trauma, like, someone pulled out in front of me and it kind of scared me because my kids are in the car, but I don't stay up at night. It doesn't flash back. I can kind of move over it. Big T trauma, I get in a major wreck or car wreck and I see someone die, or I mean, you know what I'm saying? We have a continuum there. And we know that untreated trauma, especially criterion A trauma, a criterion A of PTSD trauma, untreated over time, actually can change someone's brain structure, but also makes us more avoidant of almost everything in our life. It turns on the avoidance more and more. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is because when we think about behavior, and this is one of the reasons why assessing behavior is so important, especially in schools, for sure. Anytime you work with kids, there's this push to observe and change behavior. That's a big push. Behavior comes from somewhere. Behavior doesn't come from nowhere. There's a reason why children, teenagers, adults do and say the things they do. It's not random. Now, it could be subconscious, right? It could be like you're just kind of not thinking maybe when you're doing something, but there's a reason why. And so one of the things that we are trying to figure out as clinicians is why is this happening? What's going on? Like like when I work with couples, what makes them talk to each other the way they do? Is it something that happened in one of their childhoods? Is it a pattern they've gotten into? When I've worked with teenagers, obviously, things that happen at home are important, but also things that they take in from their friends or things they take in from social media or whatever, you name it, right? There's a bunch of variables at play. If we get specific about behavioral change, then we have to a lot of times target whatever the change you want, right? Like, in other words, if we're trying to assess behavior, that's fine. But if we're just assessing behavior with no targeted change, then why are we doing it, right? So you guys have brought up a couple of things about like kids in class and things like that. You know, what behavior do you want, or what behavior would you like, let's say, right? So we target that, whatever that is. So then then once we have a targeted behavior, then we can observe and we can record and we can kind of make notes and we can kind of help start to figure out, right? I kind of like using some of the systems theory approaches here too, like some interactional things can help too, like how they interact with kids or each other. One of the things that I have done with adolescents especially, and I actually do it with my kids too. They don't know I'm a lot more sneaky with them. I try to do it without them knowing, but is the idea that you know, everyone's watching them, everybody's judging them, and no one likes them because they're judging them, which is a teenage thing. I mean, that's our brain. One of the big questions teenagers ask is like, who's looking at me, and do they like what they see? That's a constant. Starting around 12 or 13, that's a constant dialogue. You can put those thoughts on trial, so to speak. Like, you have evidence of this, or, you know, are you looking at everyone and judging them all? And if you are, then something's going on with you too, right? So you can start thinking about like our thoughts and what people are thinking. And sometimes you can figure out what the behavior might be because of how people are thinking, like certain thought patterns. Nick was bringing up some thought pattern things that he's dealt with when he was talking about rap culture and into guns and drugs, and you know, that's a thought pattern too. That's a mindset that someone gets into. Just like it's a thought pattern of I first started noticing this kind of thought pattern with teenagers maybe about 10 years ago. YouTube started getting big and everybody wants to be a YouTube star. I mean, they're just, you know, and actually YouTube started doing seminars on how to become a YouTuber. I mean, they started doing it, like you could pay money to go do it, to learn it. So that's a thing. I mean, there's lots of mindset things that happen that could directly impact our behavior. Does that make sense? And so we don't just behave for no reason. We don't just do things for no reason. There's always a reason. Does that make sense? And so when we think about that, to me, I bring this up again because that 30,000 foot view of people is, I think, very important. And so one of the aspects of that is kind of what we've been talking about the last 30 minutes is what we take in and what we put in our brain does have an impact on us for sure. We know that. Now we've kind of been talking about kids, but I want to transition to adults because I work mainly with adults now. It's not different. Adults have different tools and maybe some different tool sets that kids maybe don't have yet. But there's some different things I think that are important. So I want to share a couple of assessment tools that I use. Let me pull them up real quick. Hang on. I'll just kind of go through these one at a time. When we start talking about adults, this is what's called a PHQ-9. So this is a self-report questionnaire for depression, or depression scale. This is one that I like because you can do this every week if you want, and get a good graph or good chart over the week of depressive thoughts. So basically it's built for a week. So the instructions are at the top. Over the last week, how often have you been bothered by any of the following problems? And there's a scale there from 0 to 3. And everything that they answer, they put a 0 or 3 by. At the end, you total it up. Scores between 0 and 9 are mild or subclinical. 10 to 19 is moderate, 20 plus is severe. So we're non-clinical, which is kind of what, if you say someone comes in severe or moderate, you want to try to work them into the non-clinical. That would be a goal, let's say. And so this would be an assessment or a way to see how people are thinking or what's going on with their thought patterns, because that thought pattern also influences what? How they behave, the decisions that they make or don't make, or how they don't behave, or the things they don't do too, right? And so this is a good one that I think is pretty, and it's really easy to give, and also really easy to score. The next one, and I'll put these up on Moodle. I thought about this morning, so I didn't put them up on Moodle yet. But, and by the way, there's some articles here that give validity and reliability to these measures, and this will all be on the this will all be there on Moodle. And so this is just a Word document. The GAD-7. So this is basically looking at anxiety. And so again, over the past week, how often you've been bothered by any of the following? 0 to 3. So 0 to 7 on this one is mild. 8 to 14 is moderate. 15 plus is severe. Anything 7 or below is considered non-clinical. And this one, a reliable change score, like if someone goes from 14 to 10, that's actually reliable. So that a change score of 4 would actually be good here. Keeping in mind that it's also highly probable, like if you charted someone's scoring over 6 weeks or 8 weeks, let's say, it will have peaks and valleys. I mean, sometimes maybe big peaks and big valleys, but there'll be a pretty consistent, you'll be able to see where people are. So these questions, kind of like the PHQ, we're going to ask questions that deal with anxiety or depression specifically. What's good about these to me also is that these are quick snapshots of the week. These aren't meant to be, here's what's going on in my life forever. It's just meant to help us right now. Now, why do I bring all this up? Because when you work with people, this part of this, at least to me, what I've come to appreciate as I've worked with people long enough is being able to assess what's going on, especially if I can't quite figure it out. But I really like giving assessments like this that are quicker, kind of get to the point quicker, so that we can help people quicker, which I think is good. I'm about to sneeze. So I wanted to show these because how people are thinking is affected by lots of different things. And if you're working with someone that, for example, is severe on each of these scales, that's going to tell you a lot of things. Maybe there's something that just happened, or maybe there's something that's been happening. And so you might do different things with them based on those scores. Typically, though, most people will gravitate towards moderate or severe on one of these, maybe not necessarily both. Okay. Now, having said that, there's other really good assessments for things like PTSD or trauma. There's good ones for that too. I think I'll share. I'll pull one of those up. I'll share one of those in our last class too. Having said all of those things, I like using these to help me understand how people think. Because if we can start to understand how people are thinking or what they're thinking, we can help them with whatever they want to change. Sometimes people want to change their behaviors, right? So having said that, what I'd like to do is jump into a discussion group real quick. And first of all, thanks everybody for jumping in and adding to the conversation. I like that. That's good. That's good for us to do. I want us to have a quick breakout group, and it's going to be about behavior. And I want you guys to talk about just two things. The first thing is, what's important about Or do you think it's important to target a change behavior? Or you just work with people until they figure that out? I mean, should you go in thinking, I'm going to target this, or we need to target this? Or do we just go in thinking, no, let's just kind of figure it out as we go? That's the first one. The second one would be, what do you think is important about helping people think about how they think? Right? Is that important? So is it important to have a target behavior that we're going for? Is it important to help people think about how they're thinking about things? Are those things important? And if so, how would you do that? And what would that look like? Okay, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of time. We're going to do, there we go. Okay, 3, 4, okay, good. We'll do about 10 minutes here, and then we'll come back.
Hi, I'm sorry about that. My computer disconnected.
No problem.
Yeah, we understand. We figured something happened.
Yeah.
Golly. All right. What'd you guys talk about? There we go.
Well, Dr. Bedard, I think the group that we were in, one of them, Sarah is a second grade teacher and I'm a kindergarten teacher. Blake is not in education. So we were talking about, from an education standpoint, we feel like that you absolutely need to target the behavior. You can't just I can't just let a kindergartner figure out why they're
Yeah.
doing. And so we need to definitely target that, not just let them, but versus Blake was saying that he is a caseworker. And so that as they get older, adults, that it could depend on the client, indirect or direct services. Are you going to just let them try to figure that out? Or are you going to guide them to that? And then we even began to bring up about the multicultural aspect. Depending on their culture, they may be opposed to you giving them direct, they may want to do that on their own. So
yeah, good. Yeah, that's good. Good. What else?
Well, with Claudia and Sarah, we talk about more in the therapy standpoint of view. And we said that it depends more on the client. I mean, some clients want to find their issue right away. And it could depend maybe on their time and actually on their budget too, on money wise. Maybe they cannot afford to have a long therapy.
Yep.
So we thought that was mainly the main reason why a client will decide whether it's short or long term.
Yeah.
So we thought it was mainly on the client. That's the client's decision.
Yeah. So here's an interesting thing that's happening right now. I just read an article in the Atlantic or the New Yorker. So it's not a clinical journal. It's very fascinating. They were taking some information from a couple of different journals, but there's a new kind of push for briefer therapy models or briefer therapy sessions. Edgar, kind of what you're talking about would be one of them, like cost would be a one of the reasons. And so even in the areas of treating PTSD, finding modes of therapy that could target significant change from 8 to 12 sessions, which if you think about that, it's pretty amazing. Like, for example, there's a couple of, or there's one specific exposure therapy that targets working with clients and change in terms of their PTSD symptoms and their behavior in 8 to 9 sessions, which is pretty quick. And if it's done well, there's about an 86% change that happens, which is amazing in their scoring when they do the scoring. So I think that's right. And there is obviously a little difference in ages, right? If we work with certain ages versus if someone that has agency over their life too, right? Like maybe they want to obviously have a little more say in whatever change they want to have. So anyway, anybody else? I'll say this too about targeted change. I think it can be helpful. Let's say for adults, for example, there's going to be multiple times clients are going to come because they feel like they need to come see someone or try to get help for something. And they might not know exactly what that is, or they might not know exactly what they're wanting help with. They just know something's going on, let's say. And sometimes people are told that they need to get help, like you need to go to therapy, like they get told that over and over. And so both of those are opportunities to have discussions about what motivates them, let's say. There's a great mode of therapy called motivational interviewing, which can be super, super helpful in helping people kind of like figure out what's motivating them. It's basically kind of like maybe like what values are you trying to have or trying to work towards, maybe what things are stopping you from having the life you want, type of discussions with people that can help them start to solidify like what they want to do or change or how they would like to be. And so you will get clients that come that know exactly what they want, know exactly what they want to change, and know exactly where the direction they want to go. And that's awesome. And then you'll get clients that kind of know, but kind of don't too. That'll happen. In the adolescent world that I can think of a handful of adolescents in 10 years that I worked with that were like, knew exactly why. Most of them came because of why. Their parents told them they should go. Something was wrong with, and 9 times out of 10, I ended up working with the family, and usually. Now, it doesn't mean that they didn't need help or something needed to change. Just now, here's the other thing that's happened. We were talking about social media. Here's the other thing that's happened and changed in mental health. You'll have a lot more folks that will come in and already tell you what's wrong with them because they've Googled it, or there's a lot of TikTok stuff now. Mental health providers even going on TikTok and giving people quick, kind of like quick diagnosable type behavior stuff, and so they'll come in thinking that. Like I've had many clients throw around things like bipolar and narcissism, and because they heard it or read it or someone told them, and they don't realize that there's like, diagnoses. You have to have certain categories and reach certain limits for that to actually happen. So that's the other thing that's also changing in mental health, because it's super easy for people to Google, symptoms and look at all kinds of stuff, and they know exactly when they come in, that's what they have, which, a lot of times is not necessarily the case. So that's another big change that's happened in mental health. So, all right. Any other questions about anything before we end our time?
Dr. Bedard, Can you please share with us that article about PTSD?
Yeah, I'll have to find it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I just read over a little bit of it, and it wasn't in like a journal. It was like it was like the New Yorker, or
Okay.
I'll look and see if I can find it.
Okay, thank you.
If I can find it. Yeah, no problem. All right, now everyone go do something else. Take a nap, go eat, something, whatever. I'm going to go to a winter guard competition for my daughter. I'm going to drive an hour and a half, and they're going to perform for 3 minutes. And I'm going to be so excited for 3 minutes.
I
And then
have a quick
we're going to sit
question.
there for like 3 hours and wait to come home. Yes, ma'am. Jenna.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're fine.
And I'm sorry if it's hard to hear me. I'm driving on my way to something. So, but and this may be a silly question, but as I was like listening to you talk about the different types of assessments and stuff, so my brain goes towards like a way of like organizing these assessments. Is there a resource out there that already has something like that has, like assessments organized by category, like depression or anxiety or marriage, or, like, is there, or is that something that you kind of have to gain and do yourself?
Yeah, and I think the book, I don't know what chapter, but the book talks about the mental health like yearbook, basically. And there's different versions of it every year. It's updated, and it's got like thousands of assessments in it. Actually, I think the Amberton Library has that, but it's also electronic. I'll put that on Moodle. I'll send a message with that in there. I don't know what chapter that's in the book, but the book talks about it too, for that very reason, Jenna, because there's so many. I mean, there's just so many that you can choose from. Now, obviously, you can go out and start, looking through and looking for, different types of assessments. But yeah, if you want to, what most people do is I don't know. This is what I've done, is kind of gravitate towards some that you try several things and you kind of gravitate in a certain direction. But I'll send a message with that information in it and see if I can find a link to it. I'm gonna write a note to myself. But and actually the Amberton Library has that too.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Any other question?
Jenna had like an actual real question. Mine is your Super Bowl pick.
Oh. Man. Can they both lose?
Nope. Go Chiefs.
Go Chiefs. Go Patrick Mahomes.
As a diehard Cowboy fan, if the Eagles win, I don't know if I could take it because they're so full of themselves. But
you went to Tech.
As an NFC East person, I kind of pull for the Eagles because I think the NFC East is a really difficult division. But I think the Eagles are going to win because their defense is better. I think their defense is going to wreak havoc. I really do.
Okay.
I think it's because I don't think Mahomes is. I think he's about 80%. He's not saying that. I think he's about 80%. It's going to be tough for him. I think he's going to have a long. James shaking his head. I think he's going to have a long day tomorrow. But having said that, he's pretty good. I think it'll be a good game. I really do. I think it'll be a good game. But who's excited for the commercials? I mean, usually the commercials are really good. But now you can go on YouTube and watch the commercials before the game sometimes. So that's dumb. Anyway, I think the Eagles are going to win. I think their defense is too good. So, but I'm not going to bet money on it. All right. Now, Go do something else. And I will see you guys next weekend. It'll be our last class on Saturday at 9:00.
Thank
Run,
you.
be free.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.